We're back now, as promised, to one of our top stories. Russia's Prime Minister Vladimir Putin's in China, and some multi-billion-dollar deals have been struck between the two sides on energy, infrastructure and space exploration. Let's cross to our Washington studio. Dina Gusovsky's there for us tonight. Hi, Dina. The negotiations seem to have been rather a success by all accounts so far. Now, is that likely to have any effect on the forthcoming US-China talks, of course, set for November this year, do you think?
Well, you're right, Kevin. After years of negotiations, it does look like Russia and China are getting closer to signing that agreement on gas supplies. China seems like it's ready to buy Russian gas, and Russia seems like it's ready to supply it. But here's the question. Is China looking to Russia as its main energy supplier? And what could this mean for Russian-Chinese relations moving forward? Well, joining me to discuss this, Derek Scissors from the Heritage Foundation. Thank you so much for being here. So I want to pose that question to you. Is China looking to Russia as its main energy supplier, and is Russia kind of looking to be independent from Europe and find different consumers?
In principle, the answer to both questions is yes. It makes perfect sense. China is the second biggest energy demanding country in the world, and Russia is on some measures the largest energy supplying country in the world, and they happen to be right next to each other. So doesn't it make sense that Russia would be China's primary energy supplier? However, we've heard this for more than 10 years now, not just in gas, also in oil, not just this deal, other deals, overland rail supply of oil, other oil deals, Chinese purchases of stakes in Russian companies. None of it ever turns out. So we have the conditions for Russia being China's largest energy supplier, but we never get the reality.
Even though Russia is kind of looking to develop new gas fields and looking at this from an economic standpoint, you're still skeptical about this?
I am skeptical. I think that the main Russian goal here is actually political, not economic. The Chinese goal is economic.
Even though it is looking to develop new oil fields and economic situations are so fragile in other countries that Russia, of course, does look at the economic ramifications of this. We can't factor that out.
Sure, but this has been true. Things really haven't changed over the last 10 years. There's been a constant expansion in Russian energy production and constant fragility in some of their customers. And yet, until recently, Russia was actually behind Oman as an oil supplier to China and not even on the board as a Chinese gas supplier. If the Russians, it's not as if today the Russian Federation, Prime Minister Putin woke up and said, hey, we really need China. That's it. Those situations, those conditions have existed for a long time, and Russian progress in that direction has been pretty minimal. As you said in the intro, I think the Chinese are perfectly willing, if the price is right, which is an important issue, to buy a lot of oil or gas or both from the Russians, and the Russians really haven't been that interested, despite all the talk to the contrary.
Well, you talked about politics, and it seems that, especially when we look at the UN and the Security Council, that Russia and China kind of oppose, have been opposing the United States politically, and now a lot of experts have said that their economies are getting stronger, that they're growing. I mean, their cooperation is getting stronger. It's growing more and more every year. So does this send a message that this could be a new strategic alliance, regardless of what actually turns out? Even that message, how important is that Russia and China are going to be partners for a while?
Well, I think it would have been important 10 years ago. I think now the U.S. has heard this. I mean, if you look in the old headlines, you'll see 3.5 years ago, Prime Minister Putin was in Beijing to negotiate a gas deal, and it was really, really important. And of course, nothing happened. And you can only do this so many times without people not taking it seriously anymore. I agree with you that Russia has political goals.
Bring the United States into the picture. Are they? You don't think that the White House is taking this at all into consideration?
I don't think at this point that they are, because we've heard the same thing from Russian and Chinese meetings for a long time, and very little has materialized. As I said, the Russians are not a particularly important energy supplier of China.
And the fact that, do you think that something might change considering the U.S. economy and the fact that people are saying that the dollar is falling, and you have all these countries, the Arab countries, talking about a different kind of currency, possibly trading in oil? I mean, we have to take that into consideration, correct?
Well, U.S. economic weakness doesn't bear directly on Russian and Chinese decisions about energy supply. The U.S. economy has been strong in this period. Now it's weak. That's not really directly relevant. The dollar is relevant. However, China and Russia's interests in the dollar are completely different. China is actually the biggest supporter of the dollar. It holds $1.5 trillion, maybe more U.S. dollars. It's constantly buying U.S. bonds.
China holds so many Treasury bonds as well, right?
So it's constantly constantly buying large amounts of U.S. Treasury bonds. It's actively supporting the dollar. It's talking about someday we need an international currency because we don't like the position that we put ourselves in. Russia's position is different. It holds some treasury bonds, but nothing like the Chinese magnitude. They probably would want an international currency faster if that was possible. The Chinese don't.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, especially with this deal. I want to thank you for being here. Kevin, we're going to keep you posted on all the latest from here in Washington, D.C., but for now, it's back to you in Moscow.
OK, Dina, thanks for that. It's good to hear you tonight. Dina Gosowski talking there with Derek Scissors, a research fellow for Asia Economic Policy at the Heritage Foundation's Asia Studies Centre.